So we've got here Roman Polanski's Chinatown. It might be reversed. I don't know how cameras work. But it's a landmark film in the noir tradition. Chinatown stands as a true screen classic. Jack Nicholson is a private eye in Jake Gittes, or Gittes, and sometimes called Gits, living off the murky moral climate of sun-baked pre-war Southern California. So I guess it's the 1930s or early 40s. Hired by a beautiful socialite to investigate her husband's extramarital affair, Gittes is swept into a maelstrom of double dealings and deadly deceits. A lot of alliteration there. And donkey doings. No, I just made that one up. Uncovering a web of personal and political scandals that come crashing together for one unforgettable night in Chinatown. Co-starring film legend John Huston and featuring an Academy Award-winning script by Robert Towne. Chinatown captures a lost era in a masterfully woven movie that remains a timeless gem. So, to me, the Jack Nicholson is the reason we picked this video of all the videos in the world. Or I should say movies, right? It's not a video, I suppose. So, spoiler alert. We're just going to spoil the movie. There's not going to be any holding back of details and plot, and I'm not going to just I'll just talk about the themes, and then you can watch the movie yourself. You're not going to watch. I wasn't going to watch the movie. Why are you going to watch the movie? But if you want to, stop the video and go watch it. So let's just get some of the basic plot points down. You've got Jack Nicholson, and Jack Nicholson, he's a good actor. He's a really good actor. And he's got a business, and his business is digging up people's affairs in their marriages. People come to him and they think, I think my spouse is having an affair, and I want you to confirm it for me. And at one point he says to this woman, he says, just go home, let sleeping dogs lie. You don't want to know. I'm sure your husband loves you very much, and you love him, and just don't investigate this. And they always, no, I need to know. And so he says, all right, draw up the standard contract, which almost seems very Faustian, the standard contract, the contract with the devil. And because they do want this knowledge, they want this Faustian knowledge of what exactly is going on in their marriage. They think they need this knowledge. This knowledge is the lack of knowledge is eating away at them. They're willing to make this pact. In the process, possibly lose their soul. So Mr. Jack Nicholson, he's going around and he's discovering knowledge like a little messenger, like a little private eye. He's going around, he's discovering all this knowledge for people. And as he does this, as he goes around, he comes upon one client, walks into his office and says, I need you to investigate my husband, Mr. Mulray. And he says, Mr. Mulray, but that's the city water commissioner. He's a big, important guy. And she's like, yes, money is no object. And so he starts to investigate Mr. Mulray. And one of the most striking things about Mr. Mulray is he's some kind of Atticus Finch. If you have never watched or read To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch is a lawyer in pre-civil rights South who defends black people who have been wrongly accused of misdeeds and crimes. And so Atticus Finch is just a very tall, spindly, liberal, principled guy. He's looking for social justice. And that is what Mr. Mulray is like. He is tall and spindly and just gives off the impression he's of the priest class, and he's very principled, and who's selfless. And, so you look at that and you say, you kind of say, how is this guy having an affair? This is very strange. And everyone agrees that it's very strange that Mr. Mulray should have an affair. But Jack Nicholson, he hunts Mr. Mulray down and he travels all to these scenic spots in California where Mr. Mulray is standing over the ocean and he's standing over the river and he's standing over the reservoir and he's in the woods and he's in, well, not the woods, but he's in the Chateau Le Chancey, and he's looking at these weird things, and he does keep meeting this young woman. He keeps meeting this young, beautiful woman. And so the assumption is, I mean, why else would you meet a young, beautiful woman in secret and hold her by the shoulders and speak intimately with her or whatever? You don't know what he's saying, but I mean, clearly he has some strong relationship with this woman, and it's a secret relationship, right? He's what do they call it? Spiriting away off to these little secret spots, and he's talking with this woman, and I mean, you assume, okay, we got him, George Bush style. We got him, kick in the door, SWAT team enters, it's all over. So as he's doing this, he's taking pictures, and he's bringing them back to the office, and at some point, the pictures get stolen. Now, I don't think this is very well done in the film, to be honest with you. It's very confusing. There should have been some kind of scene of like a cat burglar sneaking in and grabbing the photos or something, because the photos end up in the newspaper. And when they first appear, like Jack Nicholson, he's reading the newspaper and he doesn't seem all too surprised that his photos, the photos that he took that he did not release to the public, they're in that he doesn't seem too fazed in this film. And I think that's a problem because there's some mess up, there's some miscommunication there. He did not release the photos, and so people get upset at him and they say, oh, you're really digging into people's business and publicizing it. He says, no, I was not publicizing it. That was private information that got snuck to the public. I don't know how the newspapers got it. And so what then happens, here's where I'm really going to ruin the plot for you. The real Mrs. Mulray comes in, and she says, I don't appreciate you snooping on my husband. And he said, but who are you? And she says, I'm Mulray's husband, or I'm Mulray's wife. And he says, but Mulray's wife hired me to spy on Mulray. And she says, no, I don't know who you spoke with, but I'm Mulray's wife, and whoever you spoke with was a fake, an imposter. And so it's very embarrassing for Jack Nicholson, who in this film is called Jake Giddies, but I just like saying Jack Nicholson. But it's very embarrassing because he's supposed to be a private eye. He's supposed to know the truth, and he's been duped. He's been duped by this fake wife. We don't even know who she is. She just walks in, pays a bunch of money, gets the pictures, and the pictures, or there should have been some situation where he gives the pictures to her, and then you know that she's the one who gave them to the newspaper. But they can't find this woman. They don't know where this woman is. They're very confused. And Mrs. Mulray says, I'm going to sue you, and all these sorts of things. And that point is also a little bit confused because she immediately drops the lawsuit. I felt that part could have been done a little bit better. She immediately drops the lawsuit, and it's all very strange. Like, you instantly get the sense that she's dealing with so many layers of lies here that you're never going to find the truth. That's the thing about Jack Nicholson and Jake Giddies, that he wants to find the truth, and this woman is an enigma. She is such a mystery. So he's pushing through, and he's finding different things, and he's going and meeting people, and he's ripping up records, and one of the favorite parts for me was he goes into the office of the police commissioner, and he steals he says, can I get your business card? He takes a business card, and then at one point he's driving into like some military area or it's a criminal investigation, I don't know, and there are these police guards there, like, sorry sir, this is close to the public, and he says, police commissioner, whatever the police commissioner's name is, Lulberger or whatever. and they're like, "Oh, of course, Mr. Lullberger. Sorry for the misunderstanding." So I thought that was a funny sort of mechanism or technique. And he does a couple things like that, and kind of in a what's that the I don't know. That guy with the mullet, the blonde mullet, and MacGyver. He sort of MacGyvers his way around the film, which I appreciate. But eventually he meets Mr. Cross. And Mr. Cross is the father of Evelyn Mulray and also the ex-business associate of Hollis Mulray, the water commissioner. And together they owned the water company. And Mr. Hollis Mulray, was so dedicated to what was right and good. He said, "We can't own this water privately and charge people a fortune. This should be a public utility." He believed. I think there's a giant picture of FDR behind him at the beginning of this film when he's doing his presentation on why he will not build the dam because it's going to kill people and it's dangerous and it's unsustainable and all these things. He's an environmentalist, public safety. And he says, "There's not any amount of money worth giving me that would convince me to do this dangerous project that's going to kill another 500 people. I won't do it again. I've learned my lesson. I regret it." So apparently Mr. Cross and Mr. Mulray started this water company that then, I guess they sold to the county to make it private. And Mr. Cross doesn't like this somehow. He's upset about this, and they sort of split up, and Mr. Cross is now an old man, and Mr. Cross was the most explicit person where you could say there was some Christian symbolism in this film. Mr. Cross, right? And so Jake comes to Mr. Cross, and he says, "You're very respectable around these parts." And he says, "Of course I'm respectable. I'm old." And this sort of, what do we read into that? It's a critique because Mr. Cross is the villain of the film. And if Mr. Cross says something, you just sort of have to take the inversion and you have to say, we should not respect things simply because they're old. We should not respect things simply because they're Christian. And those who seem respectable are actually doing terrible, terrible things, because it turns out that Evelyn's daughter is her sister. The one that Mr. Hollis Mulray was visiting with, that was her sister daughter, because of her father being this horrible monster, I suppose. And this dark family secret comes out. And so I'm skipping a lot of details here, but anyway, Jake tries to save Evelyn, and in the process of trying to seek the truth, he gets the police involved, and Hollis is there, and she ends up shooting Hollis in the shoulder, and then driving away, and the cops shoot at her vehicle, end up killing her. And so Jake, at this point, he's a bachelor, and he's finally found this love interest in Evelyn Mulray, who I suppose in some sense was never really married to Mr. Hollis Mulray. Hollis, by the way, Hollis is holy, Holli, Holy's Hollis. So, and I was thinking of Mulray, reminded me of Stingray, but to mull is to think, and a ray is like the sun, so he's got like he's holy, sunny thoughts, and he's just the unambiguously good guy. And then you've got Mr. Cross, and to be cross is to be angry, and to be Christian, to be strict. And so Mr. Cross is the bad guy. Hollis Mulray is a good guy. You've got Evelyn, which is I like the name Evelyn. But they're doing all these things, and I guess you learn eventually that Hollis Mulray must have been a bachelor himself. He must have been a celibate priest, like a Catholic priest, because he was never truly married to Evelyn Mulray. He just married her, his business partner's daughter. He married her to protect her. He married her to keep her close and keep her safe and support her and whatnot, because she ran away from her father because of this terrible family secret, this dark family secret, which is interesting given the history of people like Woody Allen and Roman Polanski and these directors who write these nihilistic movies, probably because they're doing these sort of dark things in their own personal lives. As we know, Mr. Polanski is now hiding in Poland somewhere from the United States government for his crimes, his Epstein-style crimes, or Weinstein-style crimes, whichever of these Hollywood people you want to compare him to. They all sort of blend together at the end of the day. But anyway, so Jake, my takeaway in some sense was that Jake ignores the love for Evelyn. He loves this girl, but he doesn't understand her, and there's this mystery, and he keeps trying to find the truth. And in that process, through a terrible series of events and butterfly effects, he ends up, in a sense, being responsible for her death. And this is brutal. I mean, this is a man who is a bachelor, he hasn't found a woman his whole life, and he spends his whole life in cynicism about the institution of marriage, that everyone's having these affairs, and he's uncovering their dirty work, and that's how he makes a living. And it's quite a filthy way of living. But he does that, and he's filled with cynicism. And the movie, by the way, the title Chinatown refers to the fact that Chinatown is this town of corruption, and, you can't solve any of the crime. It's so endemic. There's this cultural difference, and, there's this interesting thing where the Mulray family has these Chinese servants, who attend to, and they're kind of, there's almost a racist element to this film, or at least a depiction of this kind of racially segregated society. And anyway, Chinatown, it represents this jungle, in a sense, it represents an aspect of capitalism, that capitalism is born out of these rich old aristocrats like Mr. Cross, and they own everything, and they own the police, and they own Chinatown, and they're going to get their way. They're going to kill people, they're going to assassinate people, they're going to intimidate people, they're going to threaten people and cut off people's noses, and they're going to poison the literally poison the wells of the farmers and blow up water towers so that they can artificially engineer a drought, so that they can get a dam, so that with the dam they can irrigate the waters of the northeast or northwest valley, so that they can turn these properties into very expensive properties, and they buy them up using the names of dead people for cheap in order to sell them for millions. And it's an interesting dynamic. And basically the message, because Evelyn dies in the end, Jake gives up, he's empty, he's probably going to become an alcoholic after the end of this. And Hollis gets away with it. He gets his daughter/granddaughter, I suppose. And so everything ends terribly, like no justice is served, no good happens. And so it's sort of like LA and California in general, and America at large, is built off of these lies and hypocrisies and double dealings and killings and horrors and dark family secrets. And there's really nothing you can do about it. All you can do is try to save and love the people around you, but you can't ever bring justice. You can't, and there's a very different way the film could have ended. Jake could have said, "No, Evelyn, you're not running away. Listen, police commissioner, this Hollis guy, he's a bad guy, he's an evil guy. I'm going to tell you all about it." And he's like, "Hollis, what are you doing here?" And he breaks down, and the truth comes out. And there's a way to have justice in this film. There's a way to say, wow, yes, Mr. Mulray was killed, and Mr. Hollis is going, or not Hollis, I'm sorry, I'm mixing the names up. Mr. Cross is going to jail, and we're going to compensate the farmers for their loss, and we're going to make sure that we do this. If we're going to irrigate the Northwest Valley, we're going to do it in a responsible way, and we're going to be ecologically conscious, and we're going to make Jake, he's going to be the new police commissioner, and everything's going to work out well. There's a way to do the film in that way, but Polanski doesn't want to do the film in that way. He wants to make a tragedy. And I was thinking about Greek tragedy as sort of the ultimate example, like the pinnacle of tragedy, this eternal, you can never surpass Greek tragedy. We're all just sort of flailing around trying to equal the great Greek tragedy. And I know that Nietzsche has a lot to say about Greek tragedy. I know he has something to say about the Apollonian and Dionysian aspects, that he believes true Greek tragedy is found in the Apollonian, and that eventually this mass man element is introduced to the Dionysian that messes it up, this perfect, wonderful Greek tragedy. But I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of Greek tragedy in the way that people are skeptical of Plato as part of a dying Greek culture. And what I want to talk about here is the Heideggerian notion of technique, techne, that this film is technically good. It's well, the technique, the lighting technique, the musical technique, the acting technique, the set design technique, all of the technique is very good. But the message is very, very bad. The message says, you know, all you can do is you can try to save the ones you love. You can't bring justice. Capitalism is based on evil. It's all a bunch of old aristocratic Christians. You can't do anything about it. And they're very anti-Semitic, and it's just a terrible world. You can't do anything about that. Well, that's a pretty negative message, and it leaves you feeling empty, and it makes you feel nihilistic. And all you can do at the end of the film is say, that was very technically well done, and I'm glad I watched that because it was so technical and it was so beautiful in that sense. But I think that is a form of decadent light culture when we look at technique and we say technique is beauty and technique is goodness, rather than the moral message, right? So with regard to Greek tragedy, or starting with Hesiod, for me, when he writes down the Greek myths, it's like, okay, technically, this is cool, or this is good, or this is interesting, because you're writing down these myths and you're making them now a basis for other Greek plays and stories and narratives. But at the same time, you're losing the sacredness. So what I'm referencing Heidegger here, I'm talking about this dichotomy between sacredness and technique, that there's an obsession with technique and quantity and technical goodness, and you could say quality, but it's a quantized form of quality, turning up the dial and refining a very refined classic. What do they call this? A landmark movie in the noir tradition, a true classic. You know, a tour de force, a timeless gem. Like that is, it is a well-cut gem, this film, but it's a dark gem, it's an evil gem, it's a blood diamond. And wouldn't you rather live in a mud hut, a wholesome, humble mud hut, which was good, which was sacred, which had a good message? Maybe, you know, a third grader tells you a story about how there was a knight and he saves the princess and they live happily ever after. It's not well crafted, but the intention is good. That's the thing about this film. The film does not have good intentions. It does not have moral intentions. It is not trying to lift you up. It is trying to break you down emotionally. It's trying to, there's no catharsis in the film. It's trying to tear you down emotionally and make you vulnerable so that you're in a state of submission to the film, and you can say, wow, that was a great film. Never seen such a good film before. A timeless gem. But in truth, I'd rather have some kind of like He-Man cartoon where it's badly made or it's not technically very good, but it has a positive message. And when we say positive and good, we're referring to the sacred, that good triumph over evil, that justice went out, that the good men triumph. And that's not what happens in this film. It's this moral inversion of what we want. What purpose is there? I guess I'm asking a big question here. What's the purpose of tragedy? Is tragedy a good form of art? Should tragedy be banned? And when Socrates, like, should Socrates be punished? Should Socrates be physically removed from society for promoting the corruption of the youth. This movie promotes the corruption of the youth, as does most tragedy. Maybe there's some exceptions out there. I thought Hamlet was pretty good. I thought Hamlet, in some ways, is about a man who's very flawed, and because he does not take action, because of his hubris or is his hesitancy, that's where all the bad things. If he just took action, then all of those terrible things could be prevented. So in some ways, I almost think Hamlet is useful. And the Bible, I suppose, is filled with tragedies. So maybe I'm being too harsh here saying we should ban all tragic forms of art, but I mean, I'm wondering if the technicality and the technical mastery that's displayed in this film really means nothing if it's not building up toward the sacred and the good and resolution and catharsis and heroism, and that we would be better off with simplistic things rather than this complexity and depth that we worship. Oh, it's such a deep film. Well, I mean, maybe it would be better to have a simple film, but a film that's good, a film that's about good triumphing over evil, that moralizes us and says it encourages us. Because we're not encouraged to be like Jake. When we watch this film, we're like, I don't want to be like Jake. He ends up horribly. But if he wins in the end and he gains social status in the end, then we would want to be like Jake. And we'd say, how can I be like Jake in my own personal life? How can I be a seeker of truth? How can I be persistent? How can I be a hero? So I think that's really what art should do, and I don't think that's what this film does. And so we're going to rate it, I guess, highly on the technical side, but lowly on the sacred side. And we're going to keep it to a short little film review. What do you think? Write in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm on a road trip. Follow me and mention me on Twitter at Jockkull, Jokkkull. I guess that's my social media. And until next time, floor review.